The Ford Anglia 105E was not just another small British family car. It looked as if someone at Dagenham had tilted the future backwards, gave it a tiny engine, and somehow created one of the most memorable shapes of the 1960s. Subscribe if you love classic car documentaries. Today, we are uncovering the strange design tricks, racing surprises, and hidden stories behind the Anglia that even devoted Ford fans may have missed. The back window that made Britain stare. The first thing people noticed about the Ford Anglia 105E was not the engine, the price, or even the badge. It was that strange reverse-rake rear window, leaning the wrong way like the car had been caught in a gust of 1960s optimism. Unlike most small saloons of its era, the Anglia used this unusual detail to create a shape that looked almost American, with little tail fins and a swept nose, giving it real showroom drama. But the trick was not only visual. The glass helped free up rear headroom, allowed a lower roofline, and was promoted as being less likely to collect rain and snow. For a modest British family car, that was a surprisingly bold statement. It made the Anglia impossible to ignore. The tiny engine that started a Ford dynasty. Beneath that playful body sat one of the most important small engines Ford ever built. The 105E moved away from the old side valve layout and introduced a new 997 cubic centimeters overhead valve Kent engine. Compact, simple, and far more modern in character. It was not a muscle car engine, and nobody in Dagenham pretended it was, but paired with a 4-speed gearbox, it made the Anglia feel sharper, livelier, and more grown up than the car it replaced. The clever part was how much future was hidden in such a small package. This little Kent unit would later become a favorite base for tuners, club racers, and small Ford performance projects. In the Anglia, it began as practical engineering. Over time, it became part of Ford folklore, the poverty spec that sold a dream. Open the door of a basic Anglia standard, and the dream suddenly became very British. From the outside, this was a sharp little car with futuristic glass and cheerful chrome possibilities, but the entry-level version was stripped right back. Items such as carpets, extra trim, a passenger sun visor, a temperature gauge, and even some interior finishing touches could be missing. Even on better-equipped deluxe models, a heater could still be treated as an option rather than a birthright. That sounds almost comic now, but it says a lot about Britain at the turn of the 1960s. A new car was still a major achievement for many families. The Anglia sold Aspirational, but it did so with thin trim, hard choices, and cold winter mornings. The new car, so radical. Ford kept the old one alive. The Anglia 105E was so different that Ford seemed to hedge its own bet. When the new car arrived in 1959, the main saloon body was a two-door design with space-age styling, sharp lines, and that famous backward rear screen. But not every customer wanted their sensible Ford to look like it had escaped from a motor show. Some still wanted a four-door family saloon with more familiar proportions. So Ford kept the older 100E style body alive in the form of the Prefect 107E, using newer 105E mechanical parts under a more conservative shell. It was a fascinating compromise. One car pointed towards the 1960s, the other reassured buyers who were not ready to leave the 1950s behind. The family car. That beat touring cars. The Anglia looked like the sort of car that should be carrying shopping, children, and a spare fan belt, not fighting for racing glory. Yet this humble Ford became a serious weapon in British saloon racing. Its compact size, lightweight, and tunable Kent-based engine gave it the ingredients racers loved: simplicity, balance, and the ability to punch above its class. The story reached a peak in 1966 when John Fitzpatrick won the British Saloon Car Championship driving a Ford Anglia. That single fact changes the way you look at the car. Suddenly, the odd little family saloon becomes an underdog with teeth. It proved that clever preparation could turn ordinary showroom metal into something genuinely competitive. The small Ford that became a production machine. For all its strange details, the Anglia was not just a quirky design experiment, it became a production success on a huge scale, across the 105E family, including saloons, estates, and vans. Ford built well over 1 million examples, turning this unusual little car into a familiar sight across Britain and beyond. In 1960 alone, Anglia production at Dagenham reached a remarkable annual figure, showing how quickly the public accepted a car that had looked so risky on paper. The genius was not simply that Ford made it distinctive, it made it distinctive, affordable, and repeatable. As production grew, the Anglia became part of the everyday landscape, parked outside terraces, lined up at factories, and buzzing along wet British A-roads. The ordinary car that learned to fly? Decades after the last Anglia left the showroom, the car found a second life in the most unexpected way. To a younger generation, the Ford Anglia 105E is not just a small British saloon. It is the flying blue car from Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. The film used a 1962 Anglia, and the production team reportedly worked with multiple cars, modified for different shots, rigs, and stunts. That pop culture afterlife is strangely perfect. The Anglia had always looked a little magical, with its backward rear window and toy-like proportions making it feel less ordinary than it really was. What began as practical family transport became a cinematic icon. Few economy cars get that kind of final chapter, so the Ford Anglia 105E was never just a quirky little saloon with a strange rear window. It was clever, cheap, brave, unexpectedly competitive, and far more influential than its size suggested. Click to watch more stories about forgotten British classic cars. If you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments what you think of the Anglia. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.